Hello and welcome to Google Classroom, creating a classroom and adding students. This video, we're going to cover two basic topics. We're going to create a classroom and we're going to add students. Let's jump right in. First step is to create a classroom. We're going to pick up where we left off in the previous video. And like the last video, there's a couple pieces of information you'll want to gather before you get started. The first is decide what you want to name your class. In the purpose of this demo, we're going to name the class with just the last name of the instructor. You can name it whatever you'd like. It can include a prefix like Mr. or Miss or Mrs. You can put your first and last name, your last name, comma, first name, or just your last name. You can really do whatever you want. And then the next piece of information to gather is what you want the section name of the class to be, which should be your building and your grade level. And then what's great is that the next step in the creation of the classroom, all the heavy lifting essentially is completed by Google within a matter of seconds if it's created in the district, maybe a little bit longer if you do this at home. Google will build the classroom for you. And the frame will look the same for all of the classes, but there are a few things like the color theme and the banner image that will be automatically and randomly generated by Google when each classroom is created. And what's great about this is that Google will do all the heavy lifting and then allow you to customize all the features that they've built into Classroom. So let's get started. We will, like I said, start exactly where we left off last time, except now we are a verified instructor in the VDPS.net organization within Google. So we're going to go back to where we did before. We're going to, in this area outlined in red, we're going to click on that plus button. It's going to expand a menu with two options. We can either join a class or create a class. And in this instance, we are going to choose Create, which then opens up a new window instead of the error we received in the last video. And it wants that information we just talked about, which is your class name and your section name. So you're going to enter that really quickly here for the purpose of the demo. We've got the instructor name and the building and grade level. Then we'll select Create, and in a matter of seconds, voila, classroom. Like I said, Google will automatically generate the color theme as well as the banner photo for your classroom. These can both be customized very easily right here on the right-hand side with those links. We can see that we've got our classroom name here in bold, and then our section number that precedes it, or follows it rather. And then we have our instructor name right at the top. And it opens it up to our classroom stream, which at this point is empty. And what I'd recommend doing even before continuing with this video, before adding students, before customizing anything else, I'd really recommend starting the tour that is provided to you by Google. This will give you a lot more information than we have time to cover in these videos, and it's definitely worth the time. It's very quick and very easy to understand. But for the purpose of this video, we are going to jump onto our next step because we've already completed our first step, which is creating a classroom. Now we're going to go to step 2, which is to add some students. There are two different ways to do this. The first way that we'll talk about is to add students with a code. This will give you a granular example of what I can show you quickly here, which is that when you are on your stream page here, when you select the student tab just to the right of that, it is going to give you what would be your classroom list, but now is a gray box with your classroom code. When you want to add your students using this code, what you'll do is you'll record that code. So in this instance, it's MQOJN7. And what you'll do is give that code to your students. And for the next step in that process, for what the students will do with that code, take a look at the student demo video, which can be found along with the other teacher demos and slides at Helpdesk/how-to videos. And it's in the subcategory, which is Google Classroom, for a little bit more information on that and for what your students will experience. If you choose this option, it is quicker for you, but it takes a little bit longer for your students. And as long as you have the class time to dedicate to something like this, it is just as viable as the other option. However, if you'd like to add a little bit work to yourself to save the time of your students, you can use the second option, which is to add your students manually. What we have here is a step-by-step list of the steps that we're going to go over in the slides. And what you can do is you can take some notes on this, you can print it off, whatever makes it easier for you when you're going to go through this process on your own. So what we'll do here is, instead of running through them and reading you the slide, I'm just going to jump right into the screenshots. So for our first step, we're going to do just like we did with the adding students with a code option. So we're going to be on our Stream tab. We're going to select Students, which will take us over into the Students tab. And we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see that grayed out box. We're going to see that classroom code. But instead of using the code, we're going to select the blue invite button, which is outlined here in red, which will open up another window, a pop-up essentially, on top of our classroom. And it's going to open us up to our Google contacts for this Van Dyke Google account. In most cases, you won't have any contacts in this list, because for most of you, I think you'll probably sign in with your account and immediately go to creating your classroom. If you take the time to customize your Google account, which includes adding contacts, if you choose to do so, you absolutely do not have to. If you do add contacts, that's what will show up in this list here. But in, I'd say probably all cases, your students won't be in that list. So what we'll do first is, instead of being on this Contacts tab, we're going to click over to where it says Groups, just to the right of that, highlighted in red. And that's going to take us to another one. It's going to switch us to the next tab over. And what we'll see here are the groups that we're a member of. Since we identified ourselves as a teacher and we were verified by the technology department as such, we are a member of the Classroom Teachers group. Since we're adding students, that group doesn't matter to us right now. So what we're going to do is select the other group. All of you should have 2 groups when you enter this, this part of the dialog box, and it should be the group that corresponds to your classroom, which would be begins with the year and then the building and then your last name. If this is incorrect, please let us know and we can take care of this. When you click on the group name, what you'll see are all the members of that group. And what you should see when you go to do this process is you should see yourself in this group, as well as any other students that are already added to your group that you will then add to your classroom. So for this demo, I only have 1 student. So what I'll do is I'll select my student. If you have, in most cases, you'll be adding all of your students at one time. The quickest way to do that is to put a check mark in the box next to where it says Select All, and then uncheck the box that lists yourself, which excludes you from being invited as a student. That's definitely the quickest way to do this if you're adding students in bulk to your classroom. For this example, we only have the 1, so I've just selected the 1 student, and I'm going to click the Invite Student button, which is now blue, whereas before I selected that student, it was faded and inactive. Now I've selected my student, it becomes blue. I can click on it. I do so. It takes about a second, another little bit of Google magic. It's going to send those invitations, and it's going to take you back to this Student tab window, where it's going to let you know here the notification balloon on the bottom left here says you invited 1 user. Yours will probably say a different number. And then I can see, instead of that grayed out box on my student code, I now have a list of students. Right now I only have 1 student, but this is where your list of students will appear. For most of you, you should have quite a few. And you'll notice that the student usernames will be grayed out because they're not a member of the classroom yet. And the status to the right-hand side will say that they have been invited. And just so that you know, if you have students that join later in the year and you don't want to add them this way, you'd rather use the code method, your classroom code will always be available in this Students tab. So you can always call back to that. And so for that part of the demo, we are done. The next step you can see outlined in that student demo for how the student would join the class after they've been invited, just as you'd be able to see how the student would join the class if you'd given them the code. And right now what we're going to do is we're going to run through a demo of creating a classroom and adding students manually. So let's switch our screens. We are going to head over to Google Classroom one more time with the user that we had previously, which is Michael Bluth. And okay, so here we are at Google Classroom. Once again, we're at that chalkboard landing page. We've been verified as a teacher. We are signed in. We're going to click that plus button and we are going to create a class. Just like it did previously, it's going to ask us for that class name and section information. We're going to put in the same information we had in the slides, and we're going to choose Create. Wait for the Google magic. Boom, there's our class. Our class has been created. And just like before, like I mentioned, Google will automatically generate a color theme as well as a background picture, which can be customized. We can see here that just like in the demo, we have the same classroom name, the same section name, and we have the same instructor. And we can see the same options over here to the right. If we hover over it, it turns into a link. We can choose a different theme. We can upload a photo. We can do a great deal of other things. We can also, like I mentioned before, which I think is a great opportunity, is to click on the Start Tour button, which will give you a feel of all the different features on the page. But for right now, we've just finished our first step. Our classroom's created. It's done. We're going to go on to our next step, which is to add our students. So before we had our Stream tab highlighted, now what we're going to do is select our Students tab. That's going to move us over to the Student area. And since we haven't invited any students yet, we're going to see that gray box that we saw from before. And as you can see here, the code is different. It's going to be unique and generated differently for every single class. Once your class has been assigned a code, it will remain that code for as long as you have that class. If you archive the class, it will not recycle that number. That number will be matched to your class indefinitely. But we're not going to do the code option. We're going to invite a student manually, like we showed in our slides. So we're going to click that blue invite button. Just like before, it's going to automatically show us this, this new pop-up window, and it's going to automatically select the Contacts tab. And since we haven't added any contacts yet, we're going to select the next tab over, which is Groups. And I should also elaborate that not only because we don't have any contacts, but because more than likely your students will not be a member of that contacts group. You'll select Groups. And that's going to give us the two groups. Just as in the slides, we have access to the same two groups. We have classroom teachers, and we have our classroom group. Since we're inviting students, we're going to select our classroom group. That's going to give us the same users that we saw previously. Ourself, the instructor, and in this case, we have one student. So we are going to select that student, and when we put that check mark next inside of that box, what we see is that button that was great, that was sort of faded out, now becomes blue. And what also happens is, you sort of hover over this, you can see that this got added as well. When we uncheck that, there's nothing there. When we check it here, what it'll do is it'll list all the students that you've selected. So in addition to unchecking this box, if you change your mind about a student, you can also click the X next to that to remove the student from that list, which I just did just now. But what we want to do is we definitely want to add this student. So I'm going to put that check mark back in the box, and I'm going to select Invite Students. A little bit of Google magic one more time, and I see that notification balloon right here that says you invited one user. That's good because I did. In your case, that number will be different. And I can see here that a student is grayed out because their status is still set to invited. But that's okay, because what we've done is we've completed the two steps that we wanted to in this demo, which was to create our classroom and to add a student. So now that we're done with that, let's jump back over to our slides. There we are. Just to reiterate, we completed two tasks. We created a classroom and we added a student. And just to reiterate one more time, all of the other demo videos can be found on our website. If you have any more questions that aren't covered, any other feedback, comments, things like that, feel free to contact us by calling extension 123 directly, or you can send an email to helpdesk@vdps.net. Thank you and have a great day.